All right, here we go. We're back at it. Finally got Daniel Miller back after a long time, guys, a long time, and he's got a lot going on. So, Daniel, why don't you just explain who you are real quick? Because if you haven't watched my first video, and you guys should go back and watch my first video, Daniel was really persuasive on his ideas. So go back and watch that, and also make sure you plug your book because I read the book. The book was really good. So, Daniel, tell everyone who you are.
You mean this book?
That book. That book.
Sure thing. Look, my name is Daniel Miller, and I'm president of an organization called the Texas Nationalist Movement, whose sole focus is the political, cultural, and economic independence of Texas. I'm a sixth-generation Texan. My first ancestor here fought at the Battle of San Jacinto, and most recently, I am a candidate for lieutenant governor of the state of Texas.
And when is that election being held?
Well, you're with redistricting and court challenges. Theoretically, our primaries were supposed to be in March of next year. But with the court challenges that we get every 10 years with redistricting, who knows?
Well, I just got to say it, man. I am absolutely blown. I watched your announcement. I was here 7 o'clock. I was watching it. And you kind of blew me away with that because honestly, our last conversation, I mean, you had spent 20 years roughly trying to get Texas back to an independent republic. And now you make your announcement and you're a Republican. How does that happen?
What do you mean? Which part is confusing?
What part is confusing? I mean, you were pretty much anti-establishment Texas on its own, and now all of a sudden, I feel like you're trying to do, a little spy, craft there, and you're going to try to get them from the inside or something. I mean, I mean, honestly, yeah. I would have thought independent.
Yeah. And here's the thing. There are really two things about this that you got to understand. Number one is, first off, I had never had any intention of running for public office. Technically I ran twice. I ran for mayor of my hometown when I was 18 years old. That does not count.
Okay, that don't count.
But that was fun, and we could talk about that if you want to. But I ran again in 2012. As an attempt by an organization called Raging Elephants, which primarily focused on Black and minority outreach, conservative outreach in communities of color. They wanted to put together a slate of candidates to run, and they built a coalition. They approached the Texas Nationalist Movement. We fielded candidates out of their slate of about 35. We fielded about 12, and I was one of those because I have and I think you'll appreciate this, right? Leaders have a do-it-first attitude, right? You never ask someone to do something you're not willing to do yourself. That's not leadership. So
yeah, but Daniel, I mean, we were talking before, and you were just like, nope, Texas. It can stand on its own. You made a solid argument, a real solid argument for it. And here you are jumping into the establishment. I know I had the feeling like, man, Daniel's going to go in there. No one's going to want to deal with them because you're still promoting, even as a Republican, we're out. I mean, obviously I live in Texas and you're saying, hey man, we're out of here. We're done with this nonsense.
Sure.
But I mean, as a Republican, it's like, I really would have thought you would have went independent on that.
Well, and that really gets to the second part of this, which is, and I think you and I may have talked about this, but I do know that I talk about it in the book, is that from the Texas election code standpoint, it really is stacked against any parties outside the two major parties, right? This is one of the just the quirks of living in a political duopoly. So, you ask any other party that wants to spin up here in Texas what ballot access looks like, and it doesn't happen. And look, we've been hounded for years. I mean, years to form a political party. And it's just not practical. It's just not feasible to do that under the way that the Texas election code is structured. So you have to look at the political parties, and specifically the primaries, as almost kind of the first step, the gateway into it. Even getting on the ballot as an independent, especially for statewide offices, is virtually impossible. Lower offices, state senate, state rep, that's pretty straightforward. I think the maximum number of signatures required on a petition to get on the ballot as an independent is 500. But and look, we're there's some of that happening right now. The TNM launched a campaign at the beginning of the session to recruit candidates to challenge every incumbent that did not sign on to House Bill 1359, which was the Texas Independence Referendum.
And how many people did you get?
Well, so far, the recruiting process, the filing window hasn't even opened yet, right?
Oh, so you're still looking.
Yeah, it's still open. So if any of your listeners go over to tnm.me/run for office or taketexasback.com, we're looking. But right now, we've got, just for the state legislature, we've already got 57 challengers recruited. We would like to get that rounded out to anywhere from 80 to 100 by the time the filing window closes. So, you have to understand that what we're working on here is probably the most coordinated, organized effort outside of a political party in Texas election history to basically flip the table. So, is Daniel Miller going to be the new, say, Bernie Sanders of the Republican Party, the outcast, the outlier? Is that what you're trying to do? You're going to go in there? I mean, obviously the reception's got to be lukewarm at best, sociable. Well, look, let's not confuse the political establishment for elected office. We are in a situation where Texas voters for a long time have elected people into office with on promises that they will make it better, right? Whether it's the sovereignty, the independence of Texas issue, if it's property taxes or the border. I mean, you take any of those issues, right? And what happens is they go in and they either become part of the establishment or they were establishment to begin with. So understand that we have to replace those people. If they don't represent us, then they cannot represent us. And the only way you do that is to find candidates to go out that will honor the words of Article 1, Section 1 and Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. That's the thing. So when people are out there casting their ballots for candidates that are coming out of the TNM, they can understand that we have been fighting since day one for the right of the people, right? The right of the people to be heard. And what we saw this last legislative session was perhaps the biggest snub to the rank and file people of Texas from the political establishment that has ever been done. Now they've snubbed us before, right? But it was very public. They made their contempt very public when people only wanted one thing, and that was just the simple right to vote up or down on the issue of TEXIT.
I know. I remember talking to you about it. You were set. Yeah. It was supposed to be there. It was going to happen, and then gone.
They put the brakes on. Look, it was thousands upon thousands of constituent interactions and communications to members of the Texas legislature, including the governor and the lieutenant governor and the speaker of the House. And they doubled down. They dug their heels in and they said, look, this bill dies. Okay. And the contempt that they showed to the people of Texas was, I think, proof positive that there needs to be a change from the state house to the schoolhouse.
So there was no reason ever really given. It was just, this is done. This ain't happening.
Yeah. Well, look, I can tell you some of the inside baseball, right? I mean, if you want to know some of the real reason, they would never publicly say. But some of the rationale gets down to Republican office holders afraid of a blue wave, right? They were afraid that it would become such a divisive issue that it would marginalize Republicans and demonize them, okay, and cause them elections in the next cycle. So that's number one.
Yeah, and it's but after what the other night with Virginia, right, in Jersey. I mean, honestly, I don't see no blue wave coming. I just don't see it. I think right. It's like an elastic band. The progressives just went too far. Now it's snapping back. People have had enough.
Sure. Now, but
we got someone in here saying Dennison. So hi, Dennison. He says he wants you to build the wall on the Texas border. He said the northern one.
Well, you laugh, but I got interviewed back in 2001 or 2002 by a reporter from the New York Times over, Texas independence. And we got to talking about the border issue because the border issue has been a big issue for that amount of time. And he asked if we supported putting troops on the river. And we said, absolutely. We believe that there should be troops both on the Red and the Sabine. And, you know, it floored the guy. I mean, I don't know how he can continue to conduct the interview, right? But to the point about building the wall, one of the key things that people need to understand is that the political establishment has directly infringed and participated in the destruction of our border with Mexico, right? We even had State Representative James White, right, who's running for Ag Commissioner right now, flat call it an attempt by the federal government to destabilize Texas. The border issue has been the number one concern for Texans, for Texas voters for 20 years.
Yeah, right? I was going to say this isn't a recent. I mean, growing up as a kid, I still remember that this was an issue even then. You know, and my wife's family's from Mexico, and obviously I have roundabout stories of people, so I understand it. You know, and even my wife, it upsets her. You know, she came legally. We went through the process. We paid the money. Right. We did what we had to do. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, just don't care. And what really floored me, and I'm a veteran, what really floored me, and of course he denies it now, it's not going to happen, but that $450,000 and $1 million per family for those kids in cages. Well, you know, what about Obama? Obama had kids in cages. You didn't see him giving money.
Yeah. Oh, look, it is absolute federal mismanagement, and look, it's intentional, right? It's an intentional. Really to call what they're doing a strategy that gives it a little too much credit, right? But it's not accidental. It is an intentional act meant to destabilize Texas. I mean, that's just the bottom line, and that's not hyperbole. That's coming from sitting elected officials who are intimately familiar with what's happening down there on the border. And what we've got, unfortunately, specifically at the top levels of Texas government, starting with the governor and the lieutenant governor, is what I refer to as their astronaut diaper strategy, right? Whereas rather than cure the stomach ailment, it's just better to try to mitigate the mess on the back end. And that's essentially what's happened. Abbott, the lieutenant governor, got together. They allocated about $2 billion for border security. But the bulk of that is spent by reallocating Texas Department of Public Safety inland 30, 40, 50 miles from the border, where they're pulling over cars and trying to interdict them after they come here. Right.
Well, I can tell you, I know there's a lot going on at the border. I have a gentleman I do business with down in Houston. His mother is in Del Rio. And out there, they're actually asking residents if you have an extra room so they can rent it to get people in there. I mean, it's absolutely crazy out there. So, I mean, the border is definitely an issue, but I guess I want to look at it from this. I know you got the points you want to throw out, and I'm going to let you do it. But when you did this, my thing was like, can you actually work with Abbott? I mean, are you going to be able to actually sit in that office and work with a man who snubbed you? Are you going to be able to work with his policies that he's trying to institute? And of course, the other Texas National Movement members who will eventually make it to office. I mean, what's the goal? I mean, you're going to be subjugated to a governor that you still don't like. So I'm not saying don't like personally. Abbott, I'm just saying policy. So anyone listening to this is me saying it, not him. So send me the hate mail, okay? I'm good with that.
Look, they can send me hate mail too. It's not like I haven't had my fair share in 25 years of advocating for Texas independence, right? Right now, some progressive is out there hammering out an email to me telling me to eat a salad, right? So I've seen it, I know it, but here
you're gonna have to get a little closer to the mic. You're starting to fade.
Sorry,
that's okay.
But the assumption in your question is that Abbott will be there. And what we are seeing right now on the ground is a groundswell that could cost Abbott his job. But to your point, I think the problem is that we have had a lieutenant governor that has been absolutely subservient to the whims of the governor, right? The lieutenant governor position is the most powerful constitutional position in Texas government. At least it's supposed to be. And what we saw during the lockdowns, right, when Abbott was closing down businesses at the behest of Dr. Fauci, when they were separating us into piles of essential and non-essential, and they were arresting salon owners and other business owners who defied the lockdown so they could feed their families. What we saw the lieutenant governor in the allegedly most powerful position in Texas government sit by and silently acquiesce to the destruction of our liberty. We don't need a lieutenant governor that's a hype man for the governor. We need a lieutenant governor that stands up for the legislative authority.
I wasn't a fan of the lockdowns. Let's be honest. I'm still working from my home office and what have you. And listen, I appreciate being in Texas for very many reasons. But I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, no one knew what was going to happen with this. There was really no data. Nothing that we knew. It was all like in real time. This is what's happening, and things were changing on a whim, right? And that's the reality of this. I mean, let's look at Obama when was it swine flu or whatever came through during his. I mean, a lot of people died during that, and of course, Biden handled that absolutely wrong as well with his administration, Obama and Biden's administration policies. Totally get it, but even, I mean, would you really have done it different without data? And this thing was lethal. I mean, really, would you have done it that much different? Not knowing.
Well, but that's the thing. You can't form good public policy with faulty data.
But there was none.
But there actually was, right? Because if you go back to the outbreak of COVID-19, understand that virtually every government in the Western world enacted policy based on a data model provided by Imperial College and Neil Ferguson, right? So we had what was happening in Italy, which got absolutely no study. It prompted World Health Organization, other health authorities to go to Imperial College in the UK to have them run computer models to determine what they were dealing with and how to potentially mitigate the impacts if there were any. Imperial College spit out this report that frankly was frightening. I mean, it was apocalyptic, the conclusions in that report and that data modeling. So you had the UK, you had the US, you had other Western governments, including Australia and New Zealand, spin up public policy that was shutting down businesses, the masks, the 6-foot rule, all of these things that did not make a whole lot of sense, right? Especially in conjunction with one another. And it was not too long after they started spinning up those policies that other academic institutions looked at the Imperial College numbers and decided, hey, we can't make sense of this. Give us the underlying code to help us understand how you arrive at these conclusions. They wouldn't. Neil Ferguson time and time again refused. Finally, they had to release it. And then the academic institutions came back and said, well, this is why your report is apocalyptic, is because your code and your numbers are bad, right? And so what you had all these Western governments that upended everybody's life based off a faulty report that they didn't dig into. They enacted public policy based on that. And then when the numbers came back as faulty and the projections came back as faulty, they refused to pivot and say, you know what, we made a horrible mistake by not questioning this before we enacted a slew of public policy.
So basically, it's the Steele dossier of the pandemic.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, Neil Ferguson has gone down in disgrace, right? He was eventually fired from Imperial College for violating the UK lockdown to cheat on his wife with another woman. So, the governments, though, the Western governments, specifically in the U.S. and even in the States, saw this as an opportunity to grab as much power as they possibly could, right? To upend, to change things. And so they used it as that opportunity. Rather than admitting that they made a horrible mistake early on, or even, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, actually just looking at the data instead of blindly following instructions, what they've done is they effectively doubled down. And so you get these really, these really crazy conflicting things. Okay, which one is it? Does a mask work or does it not work? Do I need to wear 1, 2, or 3? Is it 6 foot? What about 6.5 foot? What about 5 foot and 11 inches? Well, why can this business be open but not this business? And so you get all of this really inconsistent.
I did an interview. I think it was either before or after you. I think his name was Dr. Scott Johnson or something like that. I can't remember his name. He's out of, I believe, Minnesota, and he's a state Republican senator. Or a federal Republican senator out of Minnesota, and it was real funny because he's also a doctor. right? Now, I'm not saying he's a specialist in viruses and stuff like that, but it was real funny because he was in it when Trump and they were having all those meetings, and he's like, "Listen, it was never ever supposed to be a cure. There was never supposed to be a cure. This was not going to go away." And the philosophy was we were all going to get it. Period. The end. All we needed to do was kind of get a baseline and keep that baseline so that we could
15 days to flatten the curve.
Right. Exactly. And now it's all of a sudden we got a cure, we got a this, we got a that. I mean, the only one making money here or making well is the pharmaceutical companies. I mean,
well, and government. I mean, look, think about if you're not measuring wealth and money, you're measuring it in power. This is the largest, most unprecedented power grab in the United States in probably its history, right? I mean, think about every liberty of ours that they have been able to curtail under the threat of a virus that, based off of the initial computer modeling, was supposed to be apocalyptic, but essentially was not. Look, I had COVID. COVID exists, but when you start catching the government cooking the books, which is exactly what happened in the first 6, 8, 10 months of the alleged pandemic, they're cooking the books and they're out with it, where they're telling people, look, we're not even testing for COVID. A COVID test is not what we're using to count COVID patients. We're counting symptoms, right? And what were the symptoms? Well, symptoms that would be common in a place like Texas during cedar fever allergy season, right? I mean, those were being counted as COVID. You had in San Antonio, of all places.
Wasn't that guy in Florida died on a motorcycle, and that was COVID? I mean,
you had a family in San Antonio get livid with a local news station because their father and grandfather died from a stroke, and because he happened to test potentially positive for COVID or may have had some symptoms, they listed his death not as a stroke but as COVID. And so you're
still not answering the question though. How different would you have done it with really no real data? Because even you said the models were wrong. So how would you have done it different? I mean, if you're going to make your case, let's make the case.
Well, absolutely. So we have to understand that all the pandemic restrictions came about outside of a special session or outside of a regular session, right? So legislatively, the lieutenant governor has no power, but the lieutenant governor does have the bully pulpit. And the fact
explain
of the
to people
is,
what that is if they don't know.
The bully pulpit, the voice, right? I mean, it is the top legislative position in Texas. But all the lieutenant governor had to do at the time was stand up and say, wait a minute, before we begin to enact these restrictions, we need to take a hard look at the data before we spin up all of this apparatus and upend everyone's lives. That's the first step. That was the first thing that should have happened. Let's question the data. Let's not blindly follow orders from the CDC because it may not be the case.
Well, I mean, but I know what you're trying to say, but you're fighting and now participating in one of the biggest corporate monsters that there is. And I don't care what anyone says. I mean, most people don't realize that Republican Party and Democratic Party, they're private institutions. They're not government institutions. I mean, period, the end. But they consolidated power real well around themselves. Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, then you're trying to face media and big tech. I mean, they're selling the message. I mean, and people are dying from it. People are getting sick from it. Now, I will say that my in-laws got it and they were fine. And he's 72 or 74 and she's 60 something, right? So they were older and they came out okay. But then my wife has friends who have passed from it. So it's real. But so, I mean, the messaging, how are you going to fight messaging, right? Because now even if we look at it and say, okay, you're winning, you're in, your colleagues are in, you're able to make a difference, but the public perception and the message being sold to them by monster corporations like the Democratic Party, right, and big tech and media, how are you going to combat that? That is absolutely, a monster. It's like David and Goliath.
That's good. Look, just because battles are hard doesn't mean they don't have to be that you avoid them, right? I mean, that's just the bottom line. But to your point, I mean, if you want to take it out and sort of extend out the COVID thing, one of the things that needs to absolutely happen is Texas needs a constitutional amendment that will allow the legislature to call itself into a special session by meeting a majority or supermajority threshold to serve as a check against a governor that gets drunk with power, right? A governor that decides he can shut down businesses, fine people for earning a living, things of that nature, right? That was part of the challenge that we had during the lockdowns is we had a legislature that was relegated to the sidelines that could do absolutely nothing to serve as a check to an out of control governor. And that is an object lesson for all of us, is that we cannot, in between sessions, allow the governor to operate unchecked without the authority of the legislature and the people's representatives speaking. So that's number one that needs to be done. Aside from what happened with COVID, we can't let the governor be an autocrat. That's just not what.
Well, the other issue you have is, people don't want to work. They're going to fly out and go to D.C. and visit their friends, right? I mean, Democrats just don't want to participate. So, I mean, it's not. I mean, you're going to face that. I mean, there's going to be a lot of issues. I mean, I guess the amazing thing that I keep coming back to was I did not expect you to do what you did. It was like. It was like, damn, you know what I mean? I just was like, I was just besides myself. I got to be honest. I was sitting like, really? We're doing this? And I thought I was on board with you. I'm like, we're doing this.
Well, look, I'll tell you this. It was never in the cards for me, right? When I made the run back in 2012 for state rep as part of that slate that I was talking about, I thought that was it. Like, that was the example. I can from this point forward in our strategy, I have no problems talking to people, say, look, I've been there, I've done that, I made the run, that sort of thing. But I will tell you what happened. Starting at the beginning of the year, after the filing of House Bill 1359, as I was going around the state speaking and touring, I kept getting asked to run for lieutenant governor. And I had no idea, and to this day, still don't really understand where it came from. Why it was, why specifically that one.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
But Daniel, I mean, seriously, I mean, when I watched your announcement, I mean, there was some strong verbiage in there. I mean, you are still 100% a proponent of leaving, and you're trying to tell these colleagues that, hey, I'm going to be sitting right. I get it. I read it. I have it. I don't think you autographed it though, which I got to get that done.
We got to do that.
But I'm just sitting there going, like, you just told people I'm coming to the second most powerful seat in the state, and we're leaving, whether you like it or not. This is going to get done. After 20 years of fighting, here I am, and we're doing this, whether I got to drag you, kick you, throw you, punch you, or shoot you. Not just saying it, but I mean, it was some strong verbiage. I was extremely proud to finally hear someone to stand up and say something. I mean, I originally thought you were going to give this speech, and all of a sudden you're a Republican and you're going to do right by the Texas people, and all of a sudden oh no, we're leaving. I'm just there because I need a name. It's like, oh my God. And here we are today. I mean, you got some time to go, so tell people what you're doing. I mean, I know everyone has issues. I know you're on the issues. I know you're intelligent on the issues. I don't want to do that. I want to talk about you, what you're doing, where we're going to go, because when I asked you last time, could Texas actually get the votes to leave, you had some very good data. So now, since I know you're very analytical, what are we doing? What's the game plan? What are we going to do to get you in that seat? Where's the numbers coming from? Because you have not really done anything in the political realm. You've been an outsider, making your comments and doing your thing and trying to push other people to get what you want done. But now you jumped into the frying pan.
Well, look, that's the leadership example, right? I mean, you got to go out there, and if this is the tip of the spear, if this is where it takes us, then so be it. But look, to your point, the thing people need to understand is this has, this through the Texas Nationalist Movement and our work for Texas independence, it has really gone beyond just the aspect of TEXIT, right? Everybody likes to look at TEXIT. That's the sexy topic, right? The one that's the lightning rod. But look, we've worked a whole host of other issues as well, right? Whether it's monument protection, whether it's cultural issues, whether it's, the Texas Gold Depository Act. I mean, we've worked a whole host of issues. And so I am not unfamiliar with the halls of the Texas Capitol, right?
No one's unfamiliar. I'm just saying you've never been on the campaign trail. You've never.
Yeah, well,
I mean that's. Yeah. And don't get me wrong.
Look, hey, look, if you take it at face value, right? I've technically been on the campaign trail for 25 years, right?
All right, I'll give you that. But when you made that announcement, I was like, Daniel reached down and he was like, yeah, he's got some big ones. It was like, holy crap! It was. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or crude, but boy, that was like really, because we hadn't talked in so long, and I did not see that coming. So what's the strategy now that you're laying out to get to the seat? What are you doing?
Well, look, here's what it boils down to. Through the work of the Texas Nationalist Movement, here's what we know on the TEXIT issue. We know that if we were to put this to a referendum of the voters tomorrow, we would win, not by a little, but by a lot. Right. And we've always had the polling data to show us that, even back in 2014, where over half of Republican voters, half of independent voters, and 35% of Democrats believe that Texas should withdraw from the union. Right. And that was in 2014. And those numbers have only gone up. So we know if TEXIT goes to a referendum, it wins. So, right now, we already know that the base of TEXIT voters, we're going to connect with them because they just want an opportunity to vote on this issue and be heard. But beyond that, it's not just solely about that particular issue. It's about issues of good governance, whether it's putting the office of the governor in check, whether it's abolishing the immoral and onerous property tax, or actually doing what we need to do to secure the border. Those are the core issues that the people of Texas are concerned about.
You're sidestepping one major issue, one major recent issue in this state, the abortion issue.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm kind of anxious to see what's going to happen.
I'm anxious to see what your view is on that, because you have not mentioned it as all the other stuff you brought up, but you didn't bring that up. So my question now comes to, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. I mean, I've always done that with you. So I'm not saying give me your exact, this is what you would do. But with the way the law stands today, okay, and we're going to talk about the law part of it, not what your opinion is on abortion, because I don't want to put you on the spot and put you in the bad place. But the way the law was written, right, you agree with it?
You talking about the heartbeat bill?
I'm talking about the heartbeat bill. I'm talking about how it's not the state enforcement. It's public enforcement. That's how they got around us. I'm saying, do you agree with, I would call it a little backhanded shadiness on how they did it? I mean, they were smart. Don't get me wrong. It's a hell of a thing to go through and say this is the constitutionality of it because the state's not actually enforcing it. But man, I'm just not sure if, myself is like, you want the public to enforce it, that's gonna go sideways fast.
Yeah, look, the heartbeat bill and specifically the intent of it, I think is spot on, right? Because we should value life, right? If we value the lives of our citizens and we consider that child in the womb a citizen, it's a person, then we should not allow that life to be taken without due process.
Well,
right?
the thing here though is when you say due process, you're just adding time. It's just going to add time to the child's growth inside the womb. I mean, you're still looking at things, but there is no exceptions to the law.
Well, look, when I talk about due process, I'm talking specifically to make a clear distinction between the life of an innocent child and the life of someone who is a mass murderer on death row, right? Because those people are deprived of life through due process of law, right? So that's to make a very clear distinction between those two. But here's my point, and I think this is what people need to understand about the law. The law that Texas passed is not dissimilar in intent than laws that are being passed and or have been passed in other states recently. And all of this is really to try to force the issue in the Supreme Court to get the Supreme Court to open back up Roe v. Wade and revisit Roe v. Wade, which was really a terrible decision to make. Ultimately, we know that if the issue of abortion is put to the people of Texas, the people of Texas will vote to not have abortion in Texas. I mean, that's just
no, but listen, and I can understand that to a degree, and I'm not saying no. Believe me, it gets my goad when it's a woman's body, but then a man's got to pay for it. He don't have a choice whether or not because she chose to keep it. Like it's not a fair exchange here. So I'm not going to go there. Because, if you want to be equal, let's be equal. And it's not an equal process. So I 100% agree. But there are, I would think, some exceptions that would need to be made, whether it's medical. No, the baby's going to do more damage to the mother than, needed. I mean, there's the incest issue. There's the rape issue. I mean, there's got to be, in my mind, some way to resolve that. Now, if you're saying no abortions, then how are you going to find solutions to that? I mean, is it going to be more expensive to turn around and say Texas is going to provide all the therapy that's going to be needed for the rest of this person's life? I mean, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, and look, I think that's part of the larger conversation that needs to be had, right? You talk specifically about the heartbeat bill and kind of the way that it was structured, right?
And part of that was there's no exception.
Is what the actual probably the actual intent is in relation to that. But look, this is how we move that conversation forward, and you have to take. For Texans to even begin to have conversations over substantive issues, the federal government has to be removed from the equation, right? Because understand that this law is really playing to a strategy that is meant to sideline the federal government, to have the federal government overturn what they have said are the boundaries of the issue. And look, that's the issue that we run into time and time again, whether it's abortion, whether it is the border issue, right? But for the federal government, Texans would be able to come to serious, hardcore conclusions on these issues, but we can't even have substantive debate because all of these politicians are trying to play to a federal audience. And it's time that we take that out of the equation.
So what about the recent changing gun laws? Where do you stand on that?
Well, look, let's be honest. We didn't get constitutional carry, right? We didn't get constitutional carry. What we got was unlicensed carry with about, 50 different regulations on it that are difficult to navigate. And frankly, what we need to do is we need to go back in the next session and we need to take a look at constitutional carry and let's get that thing finally across the goal line. Let's no longer take these elected officials doing their victory dance, giving us half measures at the end of a session. Let's go back and let's really deliver on these issues like constitutional carry, like abolishing the property tax, like deploying the state guard down to secure the 1,254 miles of the Texas border. These are things that Texans are tired of taking half measures on, tired of being pat on the head, told that we don't know really what we're talking about. Let the big boys handle it. Texans want these issues done. And the beautiful part is we've always had the ability to get it done. The problem is that we have not had the willpower inside the Texas legislature or the governor's office to get it done.
Well, that
is exactly why I'm running.
I mean, in all honesty, though, we have to admit that Abbott and DeSantis have been probably the two biggest instigators against the federal government. I mean, even though they're half measures, they're at least doing something other governors wouldn't do. And I'm not saying that you should be applauding him and patting on the back for half measures, but I guess the difference between what they're doing, what you want to do is you really want to give them the wave goodbye, and you just want to walk away, have the state walk away and become its own nation. So,
it's more than that, though, right? See, your premise that you just stated is that our guys are doing more than other governors and other electeds, and simply that's not the truth. You take an issue like constitutional carry, right? The issue that we had for years and years and years was that so many other states were far ahead of us in gun rights than Texas was. And it was an embarrassment, right? We're the ones who were supposed to be the come and take it state. right? The ones that are supposed to be strong on right to keep and bear arms. But when you've got 20 to 30 other states that have more gun freedom than Texas, that's a problem. When you have a governor whose entire strategy is predicated upon looking to see what Ron DeSantis does and then doing that, right? That's not leadership. When we talk about the issues of securing the border, right? This, as we have agreed, this issue has been a major issue for a long time. But when you have people in other states, including elected officials, that are looking at Texas and saying, why haven't you taken the bull by the horns and addressed this over the last 20 years? Well, you know, that's kind of embarrassing for us because the power has always been here to do it. Or you take an issue like property tax, where you have this empty rhetoric from the governor, from the lieutenant governor, and all of these elected officials who say that they want to abolish property tax. And what they do is, instead of abolishing property tax, they give us relief that is like $200 a year, right? I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's not abolition. That's crumbs from the master's table. And they will go out and they will do a victory dance on all of those little things, trying to convince the voters that they're actually on our side. And we know from the contempt that they have shown on all of those issues, plus letting the people of Texas vote on the TEXIT issue, we know that it's never going to get done. And what they have to understand, and what I hope that you got out of that announcement speech that I made, is that the people of Texas are not going to put up with this anymore.
Well, you know, that was the one thing, because our previous conversation, I was like, well, Texas culture. And it's like, when it comes around some of these issues, it's like, where the hell is the Texas culture that I grew up with? There was Texas, and then there was the rest of the United States. I mean, that was the whole thing. And growing up as a kid, right, it was the going joke. And honestly, like I told you, we've only been here 4 years, but I got the Texas flag. I mean, I love the Texas attitude. There's more Texas pride in even products that you can walk into a store than any other state I've ever been in. So I mean, it's there, but it's like Texas pride fails at the finish line. It just stops just before. The attitude disappears. And I'm just wondering, is this because of an influx of Democrats moving into the state from California, the liberals, trying to change the philosophy and the makeup of the state?
No, that you would have to go back for many years if that were the case, right? And that is a more recent phenomena with the political, cultural, and economic refugees from other states. That's primarily where people are coming from, right? From out of state. But look, here's what it boils down to. The spirit of Texas, that spirit of freedom and independence, it still lives in the people. The problem is that we have not seen it reflected in our elections for our elected officials. And that is changing. I mean, with the rise in Texas sentiment, right? And the fact that people are beginning to wake up to the fact that these elected officials at the top and on down are not representative of them and their values, it's game over for these guys. I mean, these guys politically are dead men walking.
The system is rigged. I mean, you're when you join a party, you're part of a corporation. Period. The end. Whether it's 503c type corporation, nonprofit, whatever you want to talk about, it's still a goddamn corporation. They're out there getting money. They're out there spending money, right, for their needs. So it's still a corporation. So the problem here, I think the falsity of this is we're expecting big corporation, Democrats and Republicans, to go into government and as part of a corporation and fix it. I mean, there's already there's money involved, there's this involved, there's too much involved. And how do you get around that? That's just absolutely nonsense. I'm sure if you won, all of a sudden the Republican Party is throwing money at you just because all of a sudden you're popular and stuff. Again, it's a corporation. They want to keep their name in it. So
the fun part is if people understood how I'm not going to say weak the political parties are, because you have to understand that the vast majority of funding that's flying around in elections doesn't come from the party. When the governor has a larger war chest than the statewide party, then you understand that part of the challenge is, because even if you had officials say inside the state Republican executive committee, right, or the rank and file 9,000 delegates at the convention, say this is what we want, which is what they do, right? They create a platform, they create legislative priorities, understand that there is no mechanism to hold someone accountable who runs under that banner. You know, when you look at Greg Abbott's war chest, I mean, I think sum total, he's got over $70 million in both accounts. His campaign account from the time that he ran for governor, when he left the AG's office, ran for governor, he never shut it down. He's got a retirement plan. He pays into a 401k for his campaign staff, right? So you want to talk about the corporation. It is these political machines that build up around these individuals that allow them to pick winners and losers. You go back and you look at former Speaker of the House, Joe Strauss. I mean, he left with like $20+ million intact of his campaign account when he stepped down from the legislature, that he can now utilize to go pick winners and losers. He can go drop money in campaigns. That is part and parcel of the problem when we look at the level of accountability that exists between the parties and the candidates. But more importantly, we look at these political machines that spin up around some of these guys. Understand that we are no longer, when you elect these guys, you're not going to get listened to. They're going to listen to about one of three people. They're going to listen to pollsters, AKA they're going to lick their finger, stick it in the wind and see which way it's blowing. Number two is they're going to listen to special interests, right? People that can bring out blocks of voters so that they can get reelected. And finally, and more importantly, the loudest voice in the ear of these elected officials is the donor class, right?
Oh, no. I mean,
we just saw money donors.
Yeah, we just saw an article where major Democratic donors are probably going to hold their money this round because of the fact that Democrats can't get anything done. So why spend the money? And I get it. And the funny thing is, I have Doug Hughes, the guy who flew the gyrocopter onto the White House lawn. I got him coming on probably in the next couple of weeks, and he's a real proponent of money in politics, and that solves like everything. That solves the world's problems, like kumbaya. I'm like, whoa, calm down. You know, that's going to be an interesting one. And now he's playing a whole like 50 state gyro thing, and I'm sitting there going, oh my Lord. You know,
but look, I'll tell you this. I'll throw this one out there at you. It was controversial initially when we announced it as a position in the TNM, but I've made it an official priority of my campaign, and that is to end out-of-state donations into Texas political races, right? Because if we don't allow money, foreign contributions from places like China, why would we allow them from California or New York, right? To basically put a campaign ban, a campaign finance ban on out-of-state contributions into Texas races. That there should not be money flowing in from other states into these races. The exception being would be Texas expats that are still registered to vote here. But beyond that, you know, we don't need Hollywood money determining who our next governor is. We don't need money from New York or K Street lobbyists in Washington, D.C. having any impact on our races whatsoever. It is a direct threat to our sovereignty to continue to allow that to happen.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be crazy. So basically, no, if I had to ask you right now, because you're going to be campaigning hard, right? You're going to be campaigning hard here soon.
Going to be. That sounds future tense.
I mean, it's well, no, happening. But I'm saying as the season picks up, the campaign season, obviously things get faster, not slower, right? I mean, I'm sure you're not doing like that guy on TV threw $200 into a campaign, 150 something, and all of a sudden he's unseating like one of the biggest freaking Democrats in his area. They've been there for like 30 freaking years. I'm sure you're.
I love how he spent half of it on Dunkin' Donuts. I thought that was hilarious.
I'm telling you, a
man's got to eat, right?
I mean, and now all of a sudden he's dressed up in a suit, and you saw him, and he had like his motorcycle there in his ad and everything. He was like totally like greased up and stuff. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, this is the guy that won. So you're going to be, and I know you are now, I'm saying, but it's going to be hard. I get that. So what's going to be your elevator pitch? What's your 30-second elevator pitch when you meet people? Because you got to get them in the first 30 seconds. You got to get their attention. What's your elevator pitch?
Absolutely. So if you want the first 30 seconds, then I'll give it to you. My name is Daniel Miller, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of Texas to work for you. because I believe in Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution when it says that all political power is inherent in the people. And the people have said that they want property tax abolished. They want our border secure. They want an end to vaccine mandates and as a condition of employment. And ultimately, they want to be able to vote on our right to stand as a free and independent nation. So at the end of the day, when it comes time to vote, you have to ask yourself this. If you're going to have someone stand between you and the federal government, do you want what we already have, or do you want someone who's been proven to be a fighter for 25 years? If you want a fighter, then vote for me, Daniel Miller, for Lieutenant Governor. There's your 30 seconds.
That was beautiful, man. I almost wanted to cry. I mean, you were smooth with that one. I know you've been practicing that for a moment. That was
no, actually, you put me on the spot because I don't do elevator pitches. So
you're a natural politician.
Oh God! Hey, watch your mouth. I thought we were friends.
Yeah. Well, so what I want to do is we're gonna wrap this up because I'm going to obviously try to during the campaign trail. I would love to do this, keep putting up the videos and the podcast for you, get it out, get your information out. Obviously, I'd love to challenge you. Obviously, you're a very intelligent guy. So with the campaign up and running, and obviously going to be gaining steam. I put your information in the description as far as the website and stuff, but are you guys accepting volunteers to go out and help you?
Absolutely. Look, here's the bottom line. This actually answers a question that you asked earlier, which is, what is the strategy? Understand that we know that over half of Republican voters already support TEXIT, but more importantly, in the last primary election for Lieutenant Governor, there were about 1.5 million votes cast. Well, the good news is we enter the race already 500,000 votes to the good, because the Texas Nationalist Movement is going to come out in full force with every one of our people, and we're going to engage. But beyond that, what's super important that people need to understand is we're going to be aggressively engaging the voters of Texas, already recruiting volunteers, already raising money, already spinning up volunteer leaders, and we're going to be engaging the voters of Texas through through block walking and door knocking, through text messaging, through phone calls, through events, through speaking engagements. We are going to be everywhere by the time it comes time to vote. And so I would encourage anyone who's participating in this today to go visit our website. You can go see it at danielomiller.com or TexansForMiller.com. They all wind up the same place, and get in the fight, right? Because this is what it's going to take. You heard me say this the last time I was on, and I mean this with every fiber of my being. Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution starts off with those words that Texas is that's Article 1, Section 1, but Article 1, Section 2 starts off with the words, all political power is inherent in the people, right? And the fact of the matter is, if all political power is inherent in the people, it is utterly useless unless we exercise that power. This election right now is so pivotal in the history of Texas. The next 100 years of Texas history are going to be written in the next several months. And so what are the history books going to say about what we did here? I would hope that they said that these people here in Texas recognize the peril and the danger on the road ahead and reclaimed their right, their power, their right of self-government, and they took back their state capital. That's what I want. That's what I want history books to write about us. And I just encourage everyone who is concerned about the direction that we're going to step up and help us win this race and pretty much every other race where we're running candidates, because this is our time to take it back from the state house to the schoolhouse.
Understood. So I'm going to let everyone know who's listening or watching this that go down to the description, go to their website, and obviously reach out to your team and see if they want to volunteer or how they can help and how they can be part of the movement that you're creating. So I want to thank you to stick around for a moment, but I want to thank you for showing up. I want to thank you for letting me challenge you a little bit. I mean, I know you're on the road talking about the topics, but I wanted to talk more about you because I know you're on the campaign trail and pushing those issues, but I want people to know you and why you and what the philosophy is of you doing something that you would never have dreamed of. So anyone listening to this, that was what I'm trying to get out of this, and I'm hoping that you got that, and I'm hoping you got something out of it as well. But thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.